So let's talk about Zillow. This is one of my favorite products to use, and I've actually invested in the company. That being said, the stock price is down about 73% since February of 2021. I mean, just a significant drop. And I'm just going to be honest with you all, it's one of my worst investments of my lifetime. And so in this video, let's find out what in the world is going on with Zillow. We'll look at some of the headlines and some of the things that's happened in that business. We'll take a look at the stock. And then at the end, I'll actually share with you my actual position size, how much money I'm down, and how I'm thinking about Zillow into the future. Let's dive in. All right, so welcome back. This is Joshua Talks Money. Here I share stories about personal finance and investing. You may know I built and sold a tech company, so I learned a lot about money. I'm trying to share that stuff, the good and the bad, with you right on this channel. If that sounds interesting, please consider hitting the subscribe button. I put out content every week. You can also like this video, and that will help me with Google and YouTube's algorithm to get this video to people who may find it valuable. I'd really appreciate it. Also, as you know, I'm a huge fan of Coinbase, and in the description of the video, you can click that link to sign up and get $10 of free Bitcoin. You'll be glad that you did. All right, so let's dive right into today's topic, Zillow. I would assume that you know this company. If you've ever tried to find a rental or find a home to purchase, Zillow is usually a top platform where people do this. And they've really built a big brand around providing an awesome user experience. I've personally used Zillow to find rentals throughout my rental history, and I've sold homes on Zillow, had that opportunity as well. So I love the product. As someone who is in the software development and app development space, I think what they've done is really great. And that's what they're known for. But let's talk about where things started to get off the rails. And I'll dive into some actual articles here, and let's talk about that together. If we think about Zillow, they're so well known for having millions of users, millions of listings of homes and rentals, all that market data, all the agent partners and the ad business. It's just a beast of a company. And so this idea spun out from how can we leverage that, everything we've built, to create a new business line. Now, that business line was called Zillow Offers. And the idea of this was, imagine that I, as a buyer or a seller, can go to Zillow and buy or sell homes directly to Zillow, them being the person I'm having a transaction with, and it removes all of the traditional headaches of buying and selling a home the old way. So this was a very innovative and exciting opportunity. It reminds me a whole lot of something like Carvana, right? So you can go, you're on the website, you click around, and you buy a car and it shows up at your house. I mean, that's just like what most consumers are used to at this point. You know, we buy things on Amazon all the time. Could we buy a home and have it just be an amazing experience? And so this was really cool. And investors started to think about this, and some of that upside was priced in to the stock price. And here's an example. Back in 2018, is where Zillow Instant Offers starts to expand to Phoenix. I think the word test buying and selling is interesting. So they've been working on this idea for quite a while. In fact, if you go to this PR website, you can see they're hitting new markets all the time: Denver, Houston, Charlotte, Dallas, Orlando. And so this business started to look like the future of where Zillow's revenue and innovation could come from. Okay, so I think it's important to go to the chart now and just kind of talk through, you know, what we just described was taking place all through these years as the stock was kind of sputtering along, going sideways compared to where it's about to go. And that was right after the crash in March 2020. I call it a crash, but it's when basically the stock market sold off because of COVID-19. And then we had this enormous recovery. And I think part of that was because the crash was more so from uncertainty. It was from this forced contraction by federal policy. And then what happened on the other side of that was all of this liquidity from the Fed and the fiscal policy taking place that just made the market skyrocket. And Zillow was a big recipient of that because the home market itself just took off, as you probably know. You know, in fact, my parents, they were selling a home and their home got $100,000 more than we had been planning for just 6 months prior. This actually led to this downfall in the business model of Zillow Offers. If we actually scroll down a bit and get to some financials, we can see that in September 2021, Zillow released some quarterly results, and that's where things really started to get off the rails. You can see they had this significant loss, this net income of negative $328 million. Profit margins are just going down. You can see the year-over-year change. This is red lights flashing. Something is very wrong. And what ultimately was going on was they got in over their heads in terms of how they could scale this business. They started buying thousands and thousands of homes, but they were doing that at prices that just simply were not sustainable. And so they'd go in, they had all their technology, which is really their strength, and it was helping do some algorithmic, estimations and offers. But then when it came to the execution side of that, you have to remember, you can't just buy a home and flip it. There's often repairs, paint, landscaping, inspections, all this stuff that takes human capital to accomplish. Now, this is going on at the same time when there's a labor shortage. It's really hard to find these people. If you were building a home or just flipping a home yourself, you would see that, carpenters, painters, tile people, they're booked out for months. It was really, really hard to get that stuff done. And at that point, I believe Zillow started to become in a position of weakness, and they started to lose significant amounts of money. That's when investors really started to pull their money out. And Kathy Wood was a big, big investor in Zillow. I just follow her daily trades, and she'd be adding to this position all the time up until this news from this quarter where things looked really, really bad. So ARK Investment, those ETFs began just selling all of their Zillow stock, over $376 million worth of stock pushed out, and they cut their losses and moved on. And that came on the news of this, that Zillow is shutting down that business entirely and actually laying off 1/4 of their workforce, which is really wild to think about. Imagine 1 in 4 people on your team, if you're working at Zillow, would be let go. All right, so let's look at the actual chart. And you can see, just look at the selling pressure here that took place back in November. It's just a cliff. It's really, really amazing to look at. And this was when things clearly were in a dire place. And so now Zillow's trading around the $55 per share range. And that's, as I mentioned, 73+% from highs just back last year. Let's talk about my position in Zillow. And I think I have to actually change the time frame to even show you this. Let's go like this. So I actually have a decent sized position at $125. So somewhere up here, meaning I am down, I'm down around 55%, which is not fun, right? And I thought the $125 price point was pretty good based on the highs of around, let's say it's $202 a share. But that was before this entire situation with this side of the business took place. And now, I'm holding quite a bit at a significant loss. Over $10,000 in the red on my position. I have not chosen to average down, and I've been kind of thinking through what I want to do long term. But that brings me back to how I'm thinking about Zillow broadly. I believe in the company, as I mentioned. I believe in their technology. I think it is superior to things in the market. And while I was really excited about this other business line, I do think that their core business has been what was so attractive to me as an investor to begin with. There was a lot of speculation on their expansion and the innovation in other areas, but they're already a very innovative company. And so knowing that I'm a long-term investor, knowing that I personally use Zillow every day of my life, it's something I'm totally fine holding on to. And I would like to see this recovery story that they could hopefully put together. It's not easy to bounce back from losing 25% of your team and all of the PR and all of the negative culture that can take place. But I think there's a group of people that can look past that and know that this stuff can happen. And it can happen when you're innovating. Think back to Amazon, and they had like their Fire phone. There's some big tech failures, but that doesn't define really great companies. And so I'm excited to see what Zillow does. I do think I will eventually buy some more and bring my average down. I'm waiting to see if there's some kind of signs of a reversal back up to the upside. The economy generally feels a little shaky for these high-tech growth names. And so to be determined on where we land there. All right, so those are my thoughts on Zillow. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, again, please consider subscribing. It would be great to connect with you. And if you leave me a comment, I will reply. I reply to everyone. I love talking to you all. Until the next video, best of luck with your investing, and we will see you again soon. Thanks.